Hello and welcome to the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week web series. I'm Jennifer Nyana, energy correspondent at the National here in Abu Dhabi. I wish everyone a blessed month of Ramadan. In today's episode, we will be exploring the results of a global survey commissioned by ADSW and the host of the web series, Masdar. The survey looks into how businesses around the world are responding to the environmental, social, and governance norms in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. A quick snapshot of the survey's results reveals that 87% of executives say that improving ESG performance is now among their core strategic objectives. 50% say they're actively involved in helping their organizations to achieve net zero emissions targets. 85% say that the COVID-19 pandemic has been a sustainability wake-up call. 63% say that ESG strategies have become more of a priority for their businesses since the outbreak of the pandemic. It is my pleasure to welcome a distinguished group of executives to join our panel today to discuss the findings of the report. Joining us today are Derek Rozicki. Derek is the head of responsible investing at Mubadala Investment Company and has been a member of Mubadala's senior executive management since 2006. Owned 100% by the government of Abu Dhabi, Mubadala deploys capital globally across a variety of asset classes and industries to create sustainable financial returns and drive the diversification and global integration of the UAE economy. Next, we have Dietmar Seersdorfer. Dietmar is the Middle East and UAE Managing Director at Siemens Energy. Siemens Energy, a well-known name in energy and power technologies, plays a critical role in conventional and renewable energy in the Middle East and around the world. We're also delighted to have with us Sanjeev Kakar. Sanjeev is the Executive Vice President of Unilever MENA, Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Unilever is a multinational consumer goods company with over 400 brands in over 190 countries. Since last year, Sanjeev is also the Managing Director for Arabian Markets. He's based in Dubai, which is Unilever's regional MENA headquarters. Welcome, everyone. I'll get right to it with a key question underlying the premise of the report itself. Why is the pandemic a tipping point for sustainability and for companies to engage in ESG-related issues? Let's start with Derek.
Sure. Thank you very much and welcome. I think that really what we're talking about is the pandemic has been a catalyst in the fact that it's been a tipping point. The stage was really set with a significant amount of momentum behind incorporating ESG and considerations into business and a global business community. I think that you need look no further than the August 2019 Business Roundtable announcement signed by almost 200 executives in the US that really started to talk about the purpose of a corporation and that it needs to benefit all of its stakeholders. I think what the pandemic caused was an acceleration of this process in a very important way, because it really put in all of our faces very directly the challenges and the suffering that people were facing as a result of the pandemic, whether it was employees or employers or governments and society at large. And so the pandemic really formed a catalyst that has moved the process of the integration of ESG to the forefront of the agenda and pushed it forward very, very quickly, much faster than it otherwise would have gone had we not been in such dire circumstances that have really shown that to overcome some of these great challenges, such as climate change and others, we all really need to be working together in the same direction with a common sense of purpose to overcome these challenges that cannot be solved by any one individual or entity.
Dietmar, what are your thoughts on the premise of the report?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, for having me here. I mean, the pandemic has really shown us, like Derek was saying, that it is a catalyst for sustainability. ESG sustainability has been around for years, but health and well-being was all of a sudden immediately in the mind of everybody. And we have seen also how our world is influenced by sustainability, because we saw in the television during the lockdown, when we looked at cities which were empty, how the pollution was gone, how things were differently. But nevertheless, we had the need for energy, we had the need for a sufficient and reliable supply for that. So it came much, much more to the mind of the people. We have also seen in the last year and also in the years before that sustainability came more into the mind of the financial and of the business community, in a sense of that also investors are requesting sustainability from companies like ours and moving the energy world forward. BlackRock has sent a famous letter to all the CEOs in the world, and this is something where we see now change, and the pandemic was enforcing and catalyzing that here, and it's now on the brink on everybody's mind. And I believe it will be something that will not go away. It will really now focus us on green recovery. I think what we will see when we move now on out of the pandemic, hopefully soon, that we will see green investments, that we will see sustainability more in everybody's mind, and that the companies will really focus on such investments. And that's, I think, what has happened now, and the diversification of the energy industry is driven to the max extent as we can go at the moment.
Thank you, Dietmar. Sanjeev, what are your thoughts?
So I think this pandemic has really taught us two very important lessons. The first is that the health of the planet and people are closely related to each other, closely interlinked. And the second is that prevention is far superior to any cure. I think what it has brought to the forefront is that business has to step up and be part of the solution and not part of the problem. It's taught us that business has to step up and take the lead and be accountable for their actions and work hand in hand in partnership with governments and civil society. At Unilever, clearly what we believe is that given our purpose, which is to make sustainable living commonplace, we redoubled on our efforts during the last, I would say, 15 months to make our purpose even stronger. So clearly we've seen significant shift in across the world in terms of thinking in this space.
That's a really good point, Sanjeev, that the health of the planet and the health of the people are closely related and intertwined. Going back to Derek, could you talk about Mubadala's role in energy transition, and how have your ESG standards evolved over time?
Sure. So to understand Mubadala's sort of history in ESG, I think we go back to the early stages of Mubadala and an understanding that ESG has been a cornerstone of how Mubadala has assessed its business from the very start. It's really in our DNA. We used to talk about our double bottom line and how our financial return was necessary but not sufficient to make an investment for us. And we were originally established as a development company to drive economic diversification, to create jobs and create opportunity, all in a way that considered social and environmental impacts along the way. And as we've grown at a tremendous pace over the last years, what we now are realizing and seeing in the world around us is that we need to take advantage of all this great work and the momentum that has been created, particularly in the last few years, as we move our organization into a more institutionalized approach. We've done a very good job integrating ESG into decision-making around asset management, around in new investments in our organization over our short history. But now we need to bring a more consistent approach that comes through institutionalization, being careful not to bring bureaucracy and those kinds of things into the equation, but making sure that we're capturing knowledge and expertise that's formed in different areas around our company and transferring it across our portfolio, both to like industries and to industries that are dissimilar. Mubadala's portfolio is incredibly complex and diverse, and we recognize that ESG solutions are very different depending on what industry you're in. So as we look forward to where we are excited about the opportunity to leverage new technologies. We're excited about to leverage the convergence that's happening around standards, and to drive that into our organization in a very purposeful way. As I look to energy transition itself, I think that it's a good example of how ESG has been central for Mubadala from the start. And we recognize the need for energy transition very early on. There's no better example of that than what I believe was a very prescient decision by the leadership of Mubadala, the government of Abu Dhabi, to establish Masdar in 2006. And I can tell you, I was here with the company and working in the region for 5 years before that. There were a lot of people scratching their heads, wondering why the Sovereign Wealth Fund of an OPEC nation was establishing a renewables-focused company in 2006. In fact, you look forward 15 years, and the achievements of Masdar have been fantastic, both of course across the renewable energy space, whether it's solar or wind or otherwise, but also in terms of education and so many other areas. And I think that was just a great example of how Mubadala has had energy transition at its heart from the beginning. And you roll forward, we've played a very, very active role in continuing to contribute to this process of energy transition through active asset management, through purposeful capital deployment within our portfolio, and indeed through even new initiatives. You will have seen the recently announced hydrogen-oriented initiative that Abu Dhabi Inc. came together on, ADNOC, ADQ, and Mubadala standing strongly together in an effort to drive forward and play a leadership role in the production and use of green and blue hydrogen. And I think this is a very promising example of Abu Dhabi and Mubadala being impactful again as we look forward to how we can accelerate the adaptation of hydrogen into the new economy and continue that strong role in energy transition going forward.
Thank you, Derek. Excellent point about hydrogen. It's something that I seem to be covering a lot this year following the formation of the Hydrogen Alliance in Abu Dhabi. And also interesting point about how some of your portfolio companies like Masdar have had ESG sort of baked into their DNA, as the ADSW report says in its forward. Moving to Dietmar and Sanjeev, I mean, with the several challenges faced by companies during the pandemic, we've seen supply chain disruption, slow global economic growth, spinning off of a new firm in the case of Siemens. I mean, Siemens Energy was formed last year, just after the pandemic started. How were you able to keep the focus on accountability from your ESG norms? I'd like to hear from you, Dietmar.
Yeah, one could think it had been a stretch, but it has been ingrained into our fundamentals of the company. We are just 6 months old, and when we laid out the foundation of our company, we put ESG and sustainability in the core. Our mission is to be the most valued energy company in the world, and to lead sustainability and the energy transition. And that's something which is really in the mind and in the heart of all of our employees and of our company foundation. And our chief executive, Mr. Christian Bruch, he's the chief sustainability officer. That tells also that sustainability is at the top, looked at a core priority. And the same is with our CFO, with Maria Ferraro. She's the chief diversity officer, because ESG has also the element of the diversification, women empowerment, and all these elements. So we are also looking in this from the top of the company. We even ingrained sustainability in the payment schemes of our executives and management teams. So it's in the core design of our company. And we are also proud that in the very first quarter, when we put the company live at the stock market in Frankfurt, that we also put out our first sustainability report. And this is now something where we will work on as a company that want to lead the energy transition, to also shape this way how the energy industry is going forward. So all our efforts in the company, but also to the outside, will go into sustainability and lead the energy transition and bring the technologies, but also the solutions for the world that we need the next decades to run the energy systems of the world.
Thank you, Sanjeev. What are your thoughts on putting ESG at the heart of your strategy at a time of so many changes happening due to the pandemic?
Yeah, so 2020 was not an easy year, but sorry, it did make us a much stronger business, I would say. We responded, of course, with a lot of speed and agility to all the operational challenges that came up, as well as to protect lives. But I think what it did was the year brought back focus on environmental concerns, and Unilever redoubled down on its purpose, which is to make sustainable living commonplace. So as I said, we saw two very important lessons come through: that the health of the planet and people are closely linked, and prevention is superior to cure. So what we did was, as a company, whilst all this mayhem was happening around us, we actually refocused on our commitments. And in June 2020, we refocused on climate action, and we said that we would be committed to achieving net zero emissions for all our products by 2039. Then in September 2020, we launched what we call the Clean Future strategy, which is an innovation program around our laundry products, cleaning products, which is aimed at replacing 100% of carbon derived from fossil fuels with renewable or recycled carbon by 2030. We have a big foods business, and we recommitted ourselves to our Future Foods program to reduce environmental impact across the food chain. We then moved forward in 2021. In January, we made some really big social commitments around helping to build an equitable and inclusive society, both within the business and outside. And we are one of the largest beauty and personal care companies, and we committed to a new vision of positive beauty, which is far more equitable and inclusive. All of these commitments were in addition to all the good work that the company is already doing in the space of sustainability. We are a zero waste to landfill company. We aim to make all our packaging recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025. During the pandemic, I think there were two other areas that we really worked on, which demonstrated our commitment to ESG. The first was on our focus was on employee safety and well-being. We are a very large employer. We have more than 8 manufacturing sites across the MENA region. We have 2 big sites in the UAE alone, and clearly there were many challenges. But we were able to really ensure that the safety and well-being of people came first. And actually, through a host of well-being programs, we were able to help people tide over the stress of working through the pandemic, and keep about 80% of our employees said that they remained, positive through those stressful times, and still do. Another big area for companies like ours is to be part of the communities and to support communities at a time when they're going through the kind of stress that they are. So we donated close to $2.5 million over 11 million SKUs of our products to organizations like UNICEF, Save the Children, UNHCR across MENA. And I think our employees stepped up, more importantly, to contribute, and of course the company stepped up as well. So I think the last 12 months have really refocused the company back on something that it truly believes in and is embedded into our vision. So it was not something that we had to do differently, but it just came naturally to us.
Thank you, Sanjeev. We'll be coming back to your point about working across several brands. I think that will offer some unique insights, but I'll be circling back to Derek, and you mentioned a few of your portfolio of companies and how you're evolving, but could you give us more insight into how Mubadala is setting standards for ESG across its various portfolio of companies? It stretches across various industries. If you could give us some insight.
Sure. And, I think as I mentioned earlier, we recognize at Mubadala that ESG is actually an incredibly complex construct, particularly across a broad portfolio. And Mubadala has We have geographic diversity. We have asset class diversity, different levels of influence. We have sectoral diversity, of course. And so as we step back and look at how we want to manage that and guide it, and really ensure that we are being good stewards of ESG, good asset managers, and of course, good investors, we look at the need to respect that each industry has ESG material issues that they need to address in and of themselves, and in fact, each sub-industry. So if you look at something like financial services, what is important from an ESG perspective for an insurance company is very different than a bank, is very different than a fintech company. So even within that one financial services sector, there are subsectors that have vastly different drivers of ESG material issues within their focus. And so at Mubadala, we need to step back and understand that, embrace it, and ensure that these companies are making tangible progress on their ESG objectives over time, week by week, month by month, year by year. And in that process, as we aggregate up to Mubadala at the top, our portfolio will also make progress. So first, we look at the sector-specific or subsector-specific material aspects that are driving decisions and creating impact from an ESG perspective within any specific subsector. Then we look at where the company lies in that spectrum. It could be a front runner, it could be a laggard. How do we help it make that transition? Because when we look at this process of managing ESG risks and opportunities, we really see it as a perpetual journey. It's not something where there's a finish line. It's not something where we can tick the box and be done. It really is something where we want to make continual progress on material issues over time. And we are absolutely certain that that will create value for the organization in a sustainable way, both across environmental and social components also. So once we have the subsector specific components and the company specific posture within that subsector, we also look at what is important to Mubadala and how we can overlay that as a subset of what's important to each individual company. And we respect that some companies, what's important to Mubadala may not be relevant or material for those individual investments we may have in our portfolio. What is important to us is that they're focusing on what is material, relevant to them at the asset level in their subsector, relevant to their story as they progress and make progress over a long extended period of time from an ESG perspective.
Thank you, Derek. Moving to Dietmar, Siemens has a huge presence in the Middle East. We've had a number of conversations previously about your work in Iraq, in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. How do you balance targets such as reaching net zero by 2030 with your work in conventional power systems in the region?
Yeah, let's start with our company first, because we have outlined our ESG targets and sustainability targets as well. We want to be in 2023, we want to be completely on renewable energy across our offices in the whole world. And we are also working, of course, here in the Middle East on that. These sometimes put also stretches to the government and the regulators we have in the countries, because in not all of the countries you can buy renewable electricity straight from a supplier. So we have to work around that. In 2030, we want to be completely CO2 neutral as an entity, Siemens Energy, on a global scale. So we are working now on these goals. Having that in mind, ESG also means, I alluded earlier to it, also means how do we empower women, how do we empower other groups to work in our industry. So that's something where we are working. And on top of that, we are working then on changing portfolio. And the energy transition is something that happens really in a transition. It's not something with a switch that you switch on or off. It happens over time. And today there are people investing into technologies that they want to run these technologies to 20 years. We touched earlier the topic hydrogen, you and I, we also talked about it already in the past. Hydrogen is one of these transition topics that we will have in the next years. Today, our gas turbines, for example, that are mostly fired on natural gas, they will be able today already to use a certain amount of hydrogen. In the future, they will be 100% also capable to use hydrogen as the fuel. So you have an investment security for the things that you are investing today, and you can use renewable fuels in the future to power your electricity system. Hydrogen also plays a role in the sense of, and we heard from the alliance that we have seen here in the UAE on the Hydrogen Alliance, will also play a role to generate different energies that we used. And for example, in aviation, we are building with Masdar and with Mubadala and working together at the moment on a demonstration plant to generate synthetic fuel here in the country, and also using hydrogen as a fuel for cars or using it in other transport sectors. So we are working on all of these issues in order to really look on how do we create the impact on the transition, but also make it economically, but also technological wise feasible. Because hydrogen is still also a young technology, which we are at the moment bringing into the market altogether. And a lot of things have to develop. It's maybe there where we have seen solar at the beginning of the century, in 2006 when Masdar was found. I remember very much that at that time everybody said solar energy will never make it. But today, solar energy is one of the most prominent energies and the fastest growing energies in the world. And the same we will see with hydrogen. It needs some time to optimize and to build these energies. So it's a great thing to work in this industry, because I think we have the biggest opportunity ahead of us to really make the world CO2 free, but it will happen in a transition, and it will happen over time in the next years in all the countries. And every country that we see here in the Middle East, but also globally, is in a different state of transition. When you look to the UAE is, and Saudi Arabia maybe, they are maybe more ahead than others. Others have built very sustainable energy systems like Egypt, with high efficient energy systems. So these kind of things have happened, but they are all in a transition to move towards the ultimate goal to have maybe in 2050 and beyond then completely renewable supply of electricity to their communities and societies.
Thank you, Dietmar. Siemens is also showcasing technologies enabling energy transition at the Expo 2020 in Dubai, also demonstrating applications of hydrogen here, which is something that we're all looking forward to. Moving on to Sanjeev, Unilever, as I mentioned in my intro, has more than 400 brands across 190 countries. Talk to us on how Unilever is enforcing ESG norms within the company. Do you have a uniform standard for compliance, or do you have a tailor-made for each brand? And also, how does reporting work for all of them?
Mm-hmm. Unilever's purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. And sustainability is therefore embedded into the core of our strategy, every function, and quite honestly, every aspect of our business. We do make some of the world's best known brands, and each one of them is really powered by purpose and innovation, with a commitment to reducing our environmental footprint whilst increasing positive social impact as we grow these brands. So we have our global commitments, some of which I mentioned earlier, but how each vertical and how each brand responds to those global commitments is really, of course, determined by their strategy, their material footprint, formulations, etc. But they are all aimed at making sure that they come together and deliver to the global commitment. So take the example of our beauty and personal care business, which is really driven by a belief that of driving beauty, which is far more equitable, inclusive, and regenerative and sustainable. That means that the brands, as part of beauty and personal care, are focused not only on minimizing the impact on the environment, but also on how can they do more good for the people and the planet. So take Lifebuoy, which is one of our, the world's biggest hygiene brand. Lifebuoy runs global hand washing programs that focus on actually used to focus on reducing deaths due to diarrhea in children under the age of 5, which is a massive problem in the developing and emerging market. And during the pandemic, that focus really shifted to promoting hand washing, which, as we know, is one of the primary ways by which you can actually control the spread of the pandemic. Another example is, for instance, Dove, which talks about the Dove Self-Esteem Project, which has reached close to 60 million women globally and helps to instill body confidence in the next generation of women. If you take our foods and refreshment vertical, the focus there is to really give affordable, nutritious, and sustainable products to consumers, which is therefore saying provide more micronutrients whilst cutting back on things like salts and sugars and calories. That team focuses now increasingly on plant-based choices. So moving into plant-based protein is becoming a big action. Making sure that the ingredients which go into our food products, we are one of the world's biggest buyers of things like, let's say, tomatoes. Are these being sourced sustainably? Are we supporting the smallholder farmers who are from where our products are being sourced? And of course, the third big division is home care, where, as I said, the focus is really on the whole Clean Future program. So what we are seeing is that today consumers are asking for products that are not only convenient, but also they do less harm to the planet, that they're making, therefore a positive impact on the environment. And therefore the home care division is really transforming its product portfolio and getting out of using fossil fuels taken out from the ground to non-replaceable, in order to end our dependence on these and move towards more renewable sources of carbon. And quite honestly, we don't really need to enforce the ESG norms in each business, because, as I said earlier, we see that there is great business value between driving purpose and profits, because as an organization, we believe that the only way to do well is also by doing good.
Thank you, Sanjeev, for those illuminating examples. I mean, Dove, of course, was one of those earliest brands to talk about real women, real beauty. The campaign was really threw light on, on authenticity, and also focused on, changes within the beauty industry, and encourage women to look at different beauty standards. I also wanted to explore parts of the report that looked at new recruits to companies and how they fit within ESG norms. The report says that a lot of new recruits, especially millennials, are looking for employers that match their ethics and worldview. Is that something that you're seeing with new recruits? And also, on the other hand, how are employees adapting to your ESG policies? I want to start with Derek.
Sure, thank you. So 100% correct on that count. We see new employees coming in feeling this and truly feeling it at their core, that doing business in the right way, and a way that looks at all stakeholders, is central to what they want to be involved in and who they want to associate themselves with. So it's not just important to be able to achieve this and show this to them, but to give them an opportunity to participate in that process and to see that it's at the core of the company. I think I feel very fortunate to be working with Mubadala, because we've always hired people at Mubadala that are values-based. We've always hired people that want to find a way to make a strong risk-adjusted return and do it in the right way. As I said, ESG has been, in one form or another, central to who we are from the very beginning of the organization. So as we've just established the Responsible Investing Unit earlier this year, as part of our effort to institutionalize this process that has been going strong for all these years in Mubadala, what I'm finding is I need to build a team as quickly as I can, because the demand for evolving knowledge, building more fluency into what ESG means today in the growing context and the opportunities that are out there is tremendous. And the pull from the entire organization to bring this standardized approach, to bring this consistency, to learn from each other, and from in fact, the global community as it grows and converges on, again, different standards, approaches, more consolidated ways of managing these risks and identifying these opportunities. It's fantastic. And so I find myself incredibly energized and needing to hire as quickly as I can the rest of the team so that we can satisfy the pull from the organization.
Thank you. Dietmar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. We see that from our employees. By the way, we are also asking our employees in regular feedbacks also about where do they see the developments and where do we stand also as an organization. So it's very important to have ESG and sustainability always in the mind. The energy industry had a kind of stigma in the past, especially when you looked at the very traditional ones, the coal and systems and whatever that has been out there, that young people didn't want to go there. But when you look, most of the people that we talk today in interviews and also internally in our organization see that this energy transition is happening. They want to see where does the company set the goals, where do they want to go, and they want to be part of maybe one of the biggest market changes that we have ever seen in history, or since we are doing somehow industrial business, because the energy change, the transition that we do now is one of the biggest things that ever has happened. And many people want to be associated to that, but they want to play a role in a sustainable way. And that's what I see in the interviews and what I see in the way how the people talk to us. And it is important that we start also to tell the people what we are doing, because there is a lot of apprehensions and maybe things which are wrong in the perception. So we need to start at schools, we need to start at universities and talk to the people, also to the society in totality. What are we doing and what are the changes that this energy industry is doing at the moment? And we as a company want to contribute to that, and that's also part of ESG in totality. So I'm confident that the young people will join, and I see them joining actually more and more because they want to drive this change and they want to make it happen, that the world is in a better place in the future.
Thank you. Sanjeev, what are your thoughts?
So it's a good question. And you know, for some time, Unilever has been very aware of the fact that purpose has a great pull for the new generation of talent coming into the economy. And given who we are and the fact that it's embedded into our vision and our mission as a company, we are the #1 FMCG employer globally, employer of choice in over 54 countries, and in most of our markets in the MENA region. We also have within our industry the greatest number of followers on LinkedIn. All of this confirms the power of purpose-led vision and purpose-led culture, because it is a huge source of attraction and fulfillment to anybody who works within the business. Our employees, of course, continue to really embrace the whole environmental, social, and governance policies that are, and as the benefits are really visible to them of doing so. We, of course, on our part, take a lot of action to ensure that they are educated, they understand it, they are compliant with it, because our focus is on the fact that growth has to be in line with our values, and it's not about just delivering growth at any cost. And I think most employees in Unilever get that and get it extremely well. And they become great ambassadors for us as they spread out within their own communities and talk about what Unilever is and what we do. In fact, in 2020, we further refreshed what we call our code of business principles to include things like provision of a living wage to all employees, including the wider ecosystem that we are part of, ethical data use, transparency, greater focus on safety, and what is becoming a very important topic these days, which is around mental well-being and mental health. Another area where this whole space is beginning to really shape itself is around diversity, inclusion, and equity. As we've seen events over the last 12, 15 months, that these have suddenly exploded into prominence in the workplace. Whilst our policies in this space are global, local businesses, of course, create their own roadmaps for applying them because the issues really in this space are very, very local. And we bring all of this together under a common theme, which is, hashtag unstereotype the workplace. For instance, in the UAE, we have in November 2020, in partnership with the UN Women and some other like-minded companies, launched the UAE chapter of the Unstereotype Alliance, which is aimed at removing gender stereotyping from the workplace. I chair the advertising business group, and one of the things that we're doing is working to remove gender stereotyping from advertising. So, and partnering with the UN Women to make sure that actually comes to life. So these are some of the areas that we work on, but clearly it does have a massive and positive impact on the way people perceive the company, and more importantly, how fulfilled employees within the company feel about working there.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Lastly, how do we measure financial returns from ESG investments? The ADSW survey notes that 65% expect to see returns within 2 years. Is that a realistic timeframe, Derek?
Sure. I think we assess ESG-related opportunities, whether it's a new investment or a capital investment in an existing asset or a new approach, or some of the more intangible investments, as we would any other financial investment. And I think we have the good fortune to be able to look a little bit longer term horizon if we need to than some of our peers, perhaps across private equity and otherwise. But we assess these opportunities in very much the same way. We believe fundamentally that by focusing on the right ESG opportunities, the ones that are material to your business, you can drive value creation, a stronger risk-adjusted return, both of which are within the core mandate of our company, and that we see these as absolutely aligned opportunities over time. And so we don't really have to make any differentiation between how we look at these and look at other opportunities within our portfolio.
Thank you, Derek. That's all we have time for. We had a broad-ranging discussion. We talked about gender equality, mental health, also responsible investing, how the energy industry is embracing change, newer investments in hydrogen, what new recruits and millennials are expecting from their employers. Thank you, Derek, Dietmar, and Sanjeev for this insightful discussion on this report. The ADSW report, ESG Beyond the Tipping Point, will be available on the ADSW website at www.adsw.ae. We look forward to having you join us for the next ADSW web series episode in May after Eid, where we will look at how international aid and technology are helping drive a sustainable recovery. A reminder that recordings of today's and past episodes are available on the ADSW channel on YouTube. Thank you once again, and have a safe and blessed Ramadan.
Thank you.
Thank you all.